Miracle Under the Mistletoe by Joseph Elms. Joy only started showing when the Christmas trees began appearing in the windows. It had started as a wee pot belly, but now it was a bump. It had been easy enough to avoid scrutiny at her mum's place, where she could go a day or two without actually seeing her or Harry. It was a big place. It was the kind of place where you knew somebody was in because you could hear them or because there was a light on away at the other end of a hallway. The space was great, but the 20-minute walk to the bus stop at the end of the country road wasn't a fun pilgrimage in the dark at winter. The same wasn't true of her dad's place in Saltcoats. They shared a bathroom, and their bedroom doors were adjacent on a landing that demanded taking turns going up and down the stairs. She had started to wear oversized Christmas jumpers on the 1st of December in order to establish a vibe. She had made sure to send him some pictures of them in the run-up to Christmas. She was wearing them in those pictures. They were actually surprisingly cool. It was what she was wearing when she arrived at her dad's place on Christmas Eve. It was not a conspicuous part of her overall usual attire. Docks, ripped tights, a septum piercing, and a mullet to rival Patti Smith that her mum never missed an opportunity to mourn. "Is that a skull wearing a Santa hat with the words single and ready to jingle on it?" he asked Joey when she went in the front door. She looked down at her jumper in mock surprise. "Aye, I think it is." He went up to give her a hug. She feigned sore feet, sat beside him, and turned it into an awkward high five. He went back in his phone. He hadn't noticed a thing. "I just need to get through the next few days," thought Joey. "Then I'll tell him. It wasn't lying. It was just no saying anything." But it still crushed her on the inside. "You still going to the Metro reopening night?" he asked her. "I think that's the plan. Can you give me a lift to Alex's gaff before your airport run?" "Aye, of course, hen," he said, still engrossed in taxi TikTok. "And I'll pick you up, obviously." Joey got up and went into the kitchen. She paraded a wee bit in front of him in order to test the legitimacy of his obliviousness. In the kitchen, she put the kettle on and looked out into the garden. It had started to snow, gently. "Dad," she called through. There was no answer. "Dad, it's starting to snow and there's rolls of stuff for your garage shed bar place thing out in the grass." "I'll be fine," he replied. "It's great to have you here, darling," he added. "I love you." Ever since she was a wee lassie, Joey would go out with her dad on Christmas Eve in his taxi to count the Christmas trees. She would sit in the back like a passenger and count out of the left window while he counted out the right side. There were bonus points for doors with wreaths or snow in the corners of the windows. On their loop around the town, the idea was that they both had the same number by the end. "Shall we count the trees?" he had asked her excitedly when they got into the car. "No tonight, Dad," she had said, but sat in the back regardless. Alex was vaping on her doorstep when they pulled up. She called inside to the others. Abby and Bobby, squealing and hopping, joined her on the doorstep. "Yes, the quad is back in business," yelled Bobby, taking a double draw from her gold bar and billowing a thick cloud of smoke into the night sky. "They're Christmas themed," she cried meekly, in appeal of the disapproving look Joey's dad gave them out of the car window. "Thanks, Dad. I'll see you when you come to pick me up," said Joey. The plan was to have drinks for an hour before they left to head into town. It had been organised on the Quad GC. This was the main GC for logistics and existed in addition to the 4 other GCs whose members were every combination of 3. 4 birthdays, ostensibly, but busy throughout the year. Alex, as always, considered these pre-arranged timings purely nominal and announced that she was going to go for a shower 10 minutes before the originally scheduled departure time, despite her dad being sat in the kitchen with his car keys in his hands. Abby and Bobby grilled Joy about her new house, her mother's new marriage, and any goss on new boys she had met in the first few months at her new school. They simply refused to believe her when she insisted that there had been no one since her New Year heartbreak. It was something Joy had also spent many weeks refusing to believe. "Okay, Quad, time to slay," announced Alex when she came back downstairs, looking identical to how she did before she went up. "Phone's all charged?" she asked rhetorically. Phone, thought Joy, so distracted had she been by the interrogation, the prospect of the conversation she would have to have with her dad, and the drink she could have when they were out that would look alcoholic, that she had not used the time in the gaff to charge. Abby noticed her error. "And me bringing you an Android charger and all," she chided. After a further 20 minutes of last-minute final touches, they departed. In the car, they listened eagerly to their driver regaling stories of Saltcoat's nightlife at its peak, the dozen thriving pubs that catered to every demographic, the intermingling of young and old, the glory of the Metro. It was something they struggled to imagine, having only ever known empty bars and boarded up doors. "Jesus H. Christ," said Alex's dad as he approached Hamilton Street, perplexed that he may have spoken the past into reality. "I've not seen traffic like this here in 20 years. Joy looked in wonder as they crept down the town's main street in a convoy of cars and taxis. Between the buildings had been strung a mezzanine of Christmas lights, which gave the impression of entering a glowing tunnel of red, purple and green stars. The streets were bustling on both sides, with smiling people wrapped in scarves and wearing Santa hats, with children being led by one hand and swirling tinsel or sparklers with the other, with people braving the cold in open shirts and bare legs as they caroused in pairs and groups with arms locked so to stabilise each other, with shop fronts opened late and decorated as wonderland scenes or grottos, with music from the shops or the windows of the flats above them, with the sound of laughter and greeting and love. As they progressed slowly towards the Metro, the throbbing sound of a bass line grew louder. The traffic was now crawling, as drivers dropped their passengers and were cautious of those revellers who now walked on the road. The Quad got out the car and marvelled at the scene. Beneath the blazing Metro sign, the queue for the entrance was spilling, thriving, whistle-blowing swell of excited Saltcoat's people. "Tell ye," said Bobby, taking credit for everything from the attendance to the vibe, to the lights, to the decade-long regeneration project that had been involved in resurrecting the nightclub from abandoned dereliction. "Where's this laser show you've been talking about?" asked Abby, peering up the front of the building. "Is this no enough?" Bobby said, mockingly affronted and gesturing with an open hand around her. It was only when they approached the front of the queue that this exuberance and magisterial ownership of the situation began to transform into a more nervous pandering. Totally outside of her own fault, she had not used the main GC when confirming numbers for the guest list. Thinking quickly that afternoon when, having discovered her mistake, she had decided that the best laid plan was to get to the door and talk herself another ticket. The strategy was an immediate failure. "Your pal's name isn't on the list, so there's no room for her. It's a full house tonight," the bouncer told Bobby firmly. Joey seized on this as an opportunity. The inexplicable nature of her situation had become increasingly acute since she had left her dad's house. Seeing now people with their children had amplified these feelings. She should have told him. But how could she expect him to believe something that she herself knew was impossible? It would break his heart for him to hear what must be madness, or, worse, lies. "Go," she told her pals. "I'm tired from the journey anyway. Post pictures in the GC. Like, go, 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 go." Carried by the flow of the queue and drink-slicked FOMO, the quad minus Joey went into the metro with promises of posting pictures and leaving early. She sat in the back of a taxi as it wound its way through the silent, snowy town. She counted the Christmas trees on one side. Joey's first contraction started at the moment she simultaneously discovered that the hidden cup had no key left under it, and her phone vibrated in her pocket as it powered off. She felt her way down the side of the house. From instinct, her hand went to her pocket for the torch on her phone. A futility. The back garden was now under a blanket of snow. The rolls of insulating fibre and stacks of timber were smooth, shaped lumps. She picked her way across the garden to the door of the shed, glad of the Doc Martens. The French doors of the garage shed bar place thing were unlocked, so she went inside. She just needed some time to figure this out before anybody else get involved. A strong contraction forced her to sit on the makeshift cardboard floor covering. She leaned with one elbow against a small pallet of tiles. The sawdust underneath her started to darken as it became wet. Joey took out her phone. She knew that if she turned it on, the restart would suck the battery down to nothing, but that during that half minute, during its final electric breath, she would be able to send one message and then pray it was delivered. Thumbs poised over the screen, she sent the message. The phone was discarded and made a vibrating death knell somewhere in the shadows. Joey had resolved to waddle back out into the street and bang in the door of the neighbour when the kitchen light came on in the house. Dad came to the sink. She could see him through the window, but she knew that he could only see his own reflection. He jumped when the snowball hit the glass. Dad opened the door and came down the steps. It was impossible to tell if his caution was a fear of slipping or just fear. Joey called out to him. It was too late for her to move by the time he had called the ambulance, and there were 3 of them, 3 breathing human beings, in the shed by the time it arrived. Joey watched as her dad gazed down at the baby in his arms, swaddled in a white bedsheet that had been pulled off the living room radiator. After a long time, he said, "Your mother is never going to believe this." They both laughed. Alex, Bobby and Abby arrived. The message had gotten through. The quad stood outside the shed to let the paramedics have space, and they parked themselves on the snowy mounds on the grass. Abby puffed her vape, a blue ice miracle, into the air. Across the white rooftops of Saltcoats, she could see the swirling dome of colour lit the falling snowflakes above the metro. They watched as the promised laser show began, the 3 beams triangulating to make a white star a mile in the sky above the town. It was the beginning of a great time. A child had been born.